have a lot to watch for in the coming hour. First up, we're waiting to hear from the White House as the stage appears to be set for a Trump-Biden rematch in November after Trump's lone challenger, Nikki Haley, suspends her presidential campaign. House Speaker Mike Johnson is reportedly already looking to the former president to help with pivotal primary races and to unite the GOP now that Trump is the party's presumptive nominee.
Will that strategy work, and what are the House Speaker's expectations in the upcoming elections? We will hear from Mike Johnson himself coming up a little bit later on in the show, so stay with us.
He told me, they met at hotels. He would go to her place. And I remember him saying, you need to find her bestie who they had a falling out. That's the person whose condo it was that they would meet at. He said that they traveled to Texas, they traveled to Florida, just, a lot of different travel. He said Belize, he specifically said Belize, a cruise, the Bahamas.
But we begin with the bombshell testimony in the Georgia State Senate committee hearing for embattled DA Fani Willis as the defense attorney who exposed Willis's affair with Nathan Wade reveals more about what she learned from Wade's former attorney. Boy, does that keep getting interesting. Good to be with you all. Hello and welcome. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. John, hello to you.
There are so many interesting things going on this week and more to come tomorrow as well. I'm John Roberts in Washington, and this is America Reports. Ashley Merchant represents one of the former president's 19 co-defendants in the Georgia election meddling case and initially filed the motion to have Willis dismissed. A central argument in Merchant's calls to have Willis removed from the case rests on claims that the Fulton County DA benefited financially from the decision to hire her lover.
Today, Merchant honed in on when the two started that relationship, telling lawmakers there is proof to contradict the timeline from Willis and Wade. All right, so Jonathan Serries live outside that Georgia Senate committee room where all things just went down on today's proceedings. Jonathan, what is this committee trying to determine exactly?
Sandra, the Republican leaders of this bipartisan committee say they want to get to the bottom of whether any public funds were misused and whether Fani Willis's affair with Nathan Wade represented a conflict of interest. At issue is, when did the affair begin? Were they romantically involved after or before she hired him as a special prosecutor in the Georgia Trump case? Ashley Merchant, who represents Trump co-defendant Mike Roman, testified that cell phone data placed the couple together overnight at a condominium in the town of Hapeville near the Atlanta airport. Take a listen.
So it's pinging from his house all the way down to the condo at midnight, 1 a.m. And he calls her when he gets there. And then it goes silent for 4 or 5 hours. And then, early in the morning hours, he starts pinging again, driving back, and then he texts her when he gets home. So,
and this is before he gets hired in November of 21.
Yes.
In court last month, Willis and Wade testified the affair did not begin until after he was hired and that they shared expenses for their vacations together. A judge is expected to decide by mid-month whether either will be disqualified from prosecuting former President Trump and the remaining co-defendants in the Georgia election interference case. Those, Sandra, are the legal implications, but as you can see from today's hearing, there may be political consequences as well. Back to you.
Oh boy. Jonathan Serries live there in Atlanta for us. It was interesting this morning. It continues. Jonathan, thank you. And a lot more coming up on that, John.
Yeah, and we've got Charlie coming up just ahead. And what's interesting about all of this as well, Carrier Bond, we should point out, is that they've got this new witness. Yeager is her name. She is a Cobb County Deputy District Attorney. And she says that she can cooperate with that woman Yerity said, that this relationship started back in 2019, and that she overheard Fani Willis tell Terrence Bradley in a phone call, don't talk about this. So we'll see if that ever gets to court. It could change the whole thing.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. All right, now this.
In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president.
Nikki Haley dropping out of the presidential race and clearing the way for former President Trump to lock in the GOP nomination. Haley announced her exit after winning one state on Super Tuesday. We have got team coverage with Martha McCallum on the likely Biden-Trump rematch in November. But first, Bill Malugin live in Charleston, South Carolina. He was covering the Nikki Haley campaign last night. He was there in the room with her this morning. She made history, but it's time for her to drop out.
Yeah, John, I can tell you it was pretty somber in that room, both with Nikki Haley's staff and her supporters. She said even though she's dropping out of this race, she's going to continue to champion conservative values. And she said she's looking forward to going back to being a private citizen. Take a listen.
We must turn away from the darkness of hatred and division. I will continue to promote all those values, as is the right of every American. I sought the honor of being your president. But in our great country, being a private citizen is privilege enough in itself. And that's a privilege I very much look forward to enjoying.
And this was the moment Nikki Haley walked out on stage this morning to her cheering supporters. Look, during Super Tuesday last night, her campaign essentially went dark. We didn't hear from them for the better part of 4 hours as the first returns were coming in. Nikki Haley did not endorse Donald Trump during her speech today. Instead, she urged him to earn the support of Republicans and independents who aren't currently supporting him. Now, Donald Trump reacted to Nikki Haley's exit of the race on Truth Social. Take a look at this. He wrote in part, quote, Nikki Haley got trounced last night in record-setting fashion. He then went on to say he would like to, quote, invite all of the Haley supporters to join the greatest movement in the history of our nation, end quote. The RNC also reacting, putting out a statement on Donald Trump now being the presumptive nominee for the party. They write in part, President Trump once delivered a booming economy, secure border, energy independence, and America's strength on the world stage, the exact opposite of the chaos created by Joe Biden. Republican voters have spoken loud and clear with historically large margins, and we are more united than ever to beat Biden and Democrats up and down the ballot in November. And back out here live, the Haley campaign says based off the vote totals Nikki Haley was getting in a lot of these states, it shows that no, the Republican Party is not more united than ever. So the big question becomes now, can Donald Trump and Nikki Haley mend bridges in the coming months? This got very personal in recent weeks and months. Donald Trump was calling Nikki Haley bird brain. He made comments about her husband serving overseas, even made a comment about a dress Nikki Haley was wearing. We'll have to see how it plays out. We'll send it back to you.
He called a lot of opponents a lot of things, but later made up with them. But if he doesn't win this year, Trump, she would be well positioned in 2028 to run again. She could say, look, I'm the only person who was up against Trump who won primaries or caucuses. She won 2, D.C. and Vermont. And I'm the first woman to ever win a GOP presidential primary. So she's got a couple of things going for her if she comes back,
Yep.
Bill. All right. Bill Malugin in one of my favorite places in the world, Charleston, South Carolina. Good to see you, Bill. Thank you. Sandra?
A beautiful scene there behind him. All right, for more on this, let's bring in Martha McCallum, executive editor and anchor of The Story with Martha McCallum. Great to join you for your awesome coverage last night.
Great to be with you.
So we heard from Haley this morning, but she did not endorse Donald Trump. Here she was in her own words, Martha.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people.
So I look forward to talking to Speaker Johnson about this coming up. John and I will have him on later in the show. But this is going to be a crucial question for Republicans right now. How can Donald Trump unite the party and bring over those Republicans supporting Nikki Haley to Donald Trump?
You know, obviously, as they always say, politics is about addition. So who can you bring in to the fold? And, you know, in terms of the background from the Trump team, what they have always done is expand the base. In 2016, they brought in people in rural areas in the country, in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, many of whom hadn't been voting before. They have rarely reached towards the middle, the moderate vote, which we saw Nikki Haley really garner quite a bit of, despite the fact that she says she's always been a conservative Republican and governed as such in South Carolina. But, you know, the areas where they're seeing growth and they're seeing tremendous growth is among black voters, Hispanic voters, young voters. So it may be that those are the areas that he looks to put together a winning coalition.
Really interesting. If we can pull up the power rankings on the former president making gains with Biden's coalition. To your point, Martha, 28% of black voters support Trump versus Biden. That's 7 times the support that we saw in February of 2020. They're seeing significant support among voters under the age of 30, 51%. But without a doubt, this is a depressed electorate. They're not looking forward to this matchup, Martha. This is what we're seeing in our power rankings. 72% say they're dissatisfied with how things are going. 6 in 10 view Biden and Trump unfavorably. 18% support a named third candidate. What does that say, Martha?
Well, that 18% number is interesting. We've heard a lot about no labels. We know RFK Jr. is in the race as an independent candidate, but they are not getting any traction. And who is this no labels person, right? Who's going to generate an enormous amount of excitement in this race? It really remains to be seen. So I think one of the things that they need to focus on is not being a contest of grumpier old men. Because, last night we heard a lot of backward looking, right? And now we've heard that Biden wants to go for the jugular. I mean, nobody really wants to see these two men in their, late 70s and 80 going at each other's jugular. I think what people are looking for is not so much looking back, which we got a fair amount of in the Trump speech last night about his record and all of that, which is understandable to point out. But he needs to articulate what the future looks like under a future President Biden or a future President Trump in this case, and really, I think, emphasize a safer country and a country where you can succeed on your own merits, a place where, capitalism works and where companies are not under onerous regulations, inspiring people to grow instead of, a message that sort of inspires people to just kind of like get by and we're going to take care of you.
I said it when you sat down. I said, oh, geez. I mean, the months between now and November, a lot can happen. A lot can change. And it is going to be very interesting to watch. Martha, great to see you.
Great to see you,
All right,
too.
we'll see you at 3 o'clock.
All right, thanks.
Okay, John?
The love life of District Attorney Fani Willis back in the spotlight as Georgia lawmakers delve deeper into the misconduct claims against her. Jonathan Turley will join us with a breakdown of today's hearing and what else might lie ahead.
And a disturbing development in the ongoing border crisis. Griff Jenkins is live from the border. Griff.
Sandra, 2 weeks to the day, Colombian national on the terror list will cross the river right where we are. We'll have more on that story. Plus, just moments ago, a lifeless body pulled out of the river. We've got the video when we come back.
Introducing Ned.
It's a top concern for voters in 2024, and it is no longer just affecting border cities. Illegal immigrants are committing violent crimes against U.S. citizens all across the country, including the police. In this video, migrants seen brutally attacking NYPD officers in Times Square last month. And as you may remember, the suspect in the murder of nursing student Laken Riley on the University of Georgia campus is a Venezuelan national who crossed into the country illegally in 2022 and was arrested by New York police in a separate incident last year and then released. With all that in mind, listen to what several hosts at MSNBC had to say about the immigration crisis.
If you look at some of these exit polls, I mean, I live in Virginia. Immigration was the #1 issue. I mean, again, these could change in Virginia.
Well, Virginia does have a border with West Virginia. Very contested area.
Build a wall. Like, what?
Yeah, also has a border with Maryland, Washington, D.C., and North Carolina. But the yucking it up appeared all the more insensitive because in the Commonwealth of Virginia, a 14-year-old girl was recently sexually assaulted, allegedly by an illegal Venezuelan immigrant. So you wonder, Sandra, when folks just spout off like that, are they taking into consideration all the facts?
And I saw Shelley Moore Capito responding to that, saying to say this is insulting to me and all West Virginians is an understatement. Not only that, but mocking immigration as a top issue for Americans shows just how out of touch liberal elites like those two that just presented there are. Wow, does that hit with a lot of people right now, as we keep seeing in all these state primaries, how concerned Americans are about immigration right now, John?
So in one 15-second segment, you insult everybody who's got concerns about immigration. Yeah. You insult people who are victims of crime perpetrated by illegal immigrants, and then you also insult everybody in the great state of West Virginia, which is a terrific place if they've never been.
Not to mention put your lack of knowledge on display for all to see. John, the spiraling border crisis, meanwhile, leads to even more tragic consequences. An illegal immigrant from Mexico who entered the U.S. as a getaway is being charged in the death of a Washington state trooper. Meantime, sources telling Fox a Colombian national on the terror watch list was apprehended in Eagle Pass, Texas. That is where Griff Jenkins is reporting for us. Griff, how did that terror suspect get here?
Oh, Sandra, he simply crossed the river right near where we are. Let's go up in the air and we'll show you the area where that individual crossed. CBP sources confirm that 2 weeks ago today, 40-year-old Colombian national named Carlos Obed Yepes Bedoya crossed in this area, was apprehended by DPS first, turned over to Border Patrol, and was a positive match to the terror watch list. Now, the terror organization was not named, but it comes as this fiscal year, 58 terrorists have crossed the southern border, one on the northern border. This add one more, that makes it 60. Compare that to 2019, Sandra. There were 0. 2020, only 3. National Border Patrol Council President Brandon Judd had this to say.
Yeah, in the past, everybody would be outraged, and now it's just like, oh, this happens all the time, and that's really frustrating because that destabilizes everything that we're trying to do on the border.
And as you mentioned, out west, the family of 27-year-old Washington State Trooper Christopher Gadd is in mourning. He leaves behind a wife and 2-year-old child. ICE confirms to Fox Mexican national Raul Benitez Santana, illegally present in the U.S., is charged in the vehicular homicide of Trooper Gadd. You see him here on your screen. ICE has placed a detainer on him, and he has a rap sheet of prior convictions in the U.S., including domestic violence assault, possession of marijuana, and traffic offenses dated back 10 years. Finally, take a look at this video. Just moments ago, we watched as Mexican authorities pulled a lifeless body out of the river, a deadly reminder of the dangers that migrants face in this migrant crisis trying to get to the U.S. And I'll leave you with this, Sandra. We just got brand new numbers. For the 5th straight day, more than 7,000 migrant encounters at the southern border. That's 35,000 in 5 days. That's larger than the entire population of Eagle Pass, Texas.
Wow.
Sandra?
Griff Jenkins in Eagle Pass for us. Griff, thank you. John?
And now back to our top story, Sandra. Georgia defense attorney Ashley Merchant testifying before the state Senate committee about the misconduct allegations against District Attorney Fani Willis. The committee is zeroing in on everything from Willis's lavish trips to Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade's cell phone records. Let's bring in Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney, professor, and a Fox News contributor. So Ashley Merchant at the hearing was talking about the pings that were registered from Nathan Wade's cell phone at or near the second home of Fani Willis. Listen to what she said.
So it's pinging from his house all the way down to the condo at midnight, 1 a.m. And he calls her when he gets there. And then it goes silent for 4 or 5 hours. And then, early in the morning hours, he starts pinging again, driving back, and then he texts her when he gets home.
And this is before he gets hired in November of 21.
Yes.
So, I mean, there could be a number of explanations, Jonathan, but what do you think?
Well, those explanations are certainly dwindling. I mean, the fact is that this type of locational evidence is always somewhat difficult to use in trial because it puts you in the general facility of a location. But often in cities, you could have restaurants and theaters and other reasons why someone might be there. They may even be driving through. What Merchant did a good job of is pinpointing that one series of locational findings to say, well, you can't get much stronger than that circumstantially. I mean, you have the pings going to her house, a long delay at that location, and then the early next morning pinging all the way back, and with communications to Willis on both ends. That is not consistent with the relationship that they described in their testimony.
And then there's another person who has come forward to say that she knows that the relationship began in 2019. She's the assistant district attorney in Cobb County. Her name is Cindy Lee Yeager. She was a friend of Terrence Bradley and says Bradley was in her office visiting her one day, not too long ago, got a phone call from Fani Willis, and she could overhear the conversation in which Fani Willis said, they're coming after us. You don't need to tell them anything. Now, he swore under oath that he didn't have any conversations with anybody about the case or about his testimony. So 2 questions here. Will the judge allow Cindy Lee Yeager to come forward and give more testimony? And what about those claims from Terrence Bradley that he didn't talk to anybody?
Yeah, the key here may be the timing of when that call came in, whether it was before witnesses were called, even before this motion was filed. But it does raise serious questions about influencing a witness. Keep in mind that Wade and Willis are now accused by many of lying on the stand, of filing false papers with the court. They're prosecuting people for that. 19 of the counts that they have in the election interference case involve false statements, false filings, or perjury. And they are now accused by many of the same conduct. They also charge influencing of witnesses. So the court may find it difficult to ignore that second issue of, was there pressure put on Bradley? Because when he was on the stand, most of us were really surprised. He looked like it was a hostage video. He looked like, he had a virtual gun to his head, and he was trying to get out of this as fast as he could. But the judge may be faced with a cascading failure. If he believes that Wade and Willis lied on the stand, can he believe the other aspects of their testimony?
Yeah,
and so you can have this cascading failure in the judge's mind.
Yeah, he was up there on the stand. Looks like somebody had given him a big shot of Versed, which is a very powerful amnestic, because he couldn't remember anything. I want to ask you quickly about this because you wrote about this. And this is Congressman Jamie Raskin taking what the Supreme Court suggested and running with it, that if you're going to disqualify somebody under the 14th Amendment, Congress is the only one that's got the power to do that. He is writing up legislation, which is going to go nowhere. But here's what you wrote about it. You said Democrats rushed to keep Trump off ballot after SCOTUS decision because election can't be left to voters. Tongue firmly in cheek there. It appears that the last thing Democrats want is for the unanimous decision to actually lead to an outbreak of democracy. Where the court expressly warned of chaos in elections, Raskin and others appear eager to be agents of chaos in Congress. So 2 things here. So obviously this plays well politically for Raskin, even though it's not going to go anywhere. But our Kerry Urban is suggesting that maybe if Trump were to win the election and Democrats were to regain control of Congress, there might actually be a post-election push to disqualify Trump as president under the 14th Amendment.
Well, anything is possible, because you had a court saying, the Supreme Court expressly said that the public should not have to deal or tolerate this level of chaos in an election. And essentially, Representative Raskin said, oh, yes, they do. I mean, he basically came back and said, we're going to move this over to Congress. Keep in mind that the prior legislation that the Democrats have put forward that are referenced by Raskin sought not just to disqualify Trump. Many of those members were seeking to disqualify dozens of their colleagues, other Republicans off ballots, to cleanse ballots of these Republican incumbents. So this is a direct assault on what most of us view as democratic values. But, they're going to have to thread that needle, and I think they could trip more legal problems. Yes, this rests with Congress. The Constitution says that, but you have to do it right. And they seem to be in the rush just to preserve chaos at all costs.
Seems to me, too, that a lot of people would think that if you want a clean house in Congress, the best way to do it is to let the voters decide. And that's something that cuts both ways. Jonathan, great to see you. Thank you,
There's a novel idea you got there.
Yeah. It'll never fly. Sandra?
All right. Breaking moments ago. Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips has officially dropped his bid for Democratic presidential nomination. His announcement was just posted on X. He writes, quote, "It is clear that alternative is not me. And it is clear that Joe Biden is our candidate and our opportunity to demonstrate what type of country America is and intends to be." It comes after President Biden's sweeping Super Tuesday wins. That just in. John?
All right. And we'll see what happens from here on in. House lawmakers gearing up to vote on the Laken-Riley Act, possibly as soon as tomorrow, after a Venezuelan migrant was charged with murdering the nursing student less than 2 weeks ago in Georgia. House Speaker Mike Johnson will tell us what's in the bill and why Republicans are making that a priority.
Plus, a famous photo nearly banned by the VA until common sense prevails. Congressman Mike Waltz with reaction to the woke memo and the far left crusade to erase history.
I have moderate to severe Crohn's disease. Now,
Super Tuesday set to begin in just minutes. The stage set for a Trump-Biden rematch in November. But will President Biden commit to a debate against the presumptive GOP nominee? Fox's Peter Ducey will ask Karine Jean-Pierre that question when she takes the podium, and we will let you know what she says or doesn't say.
Seattle let loose all the pent-up emotions of 3 years and 8 months of war. And to the victors, the spoils. The pose may not be dignified, but the young lady is not the least upset. Peace, it's wonderful. But the greatest, wildest celebration of all was in New York's Times Square, where 2 million people, by far the greatest in the city's history, filled the streets all day waiting for the official word. A hilarious, happy throng. They cheered every rumor that it was all over.
A joyful celebration immortalized in this iconic image. We've all seen it, marking the end of World War II. But a top Veterans Affairs official ordered prints of the photo to be removed from all VA buildings for, quote, psychological safety, claiming it depicts a non-consensual act. The memo banning the photo has now been rescinded. Florida Congressman Mike Waltz is a member of the Armed Services Committee and a former Green Beret commander. I would think this would, I couldn't believe it. It sounds like the Babylon Bee. But this was the quote from the original controversial memo, Congressman, to foster a more trauma-informed environment that promotes the psychological safety of our employees and the veterans we serve. Photographs depicting the VJ Day in Times Square should be removed from all Veteran Health Administration facilities. You know what the New York Post cover is today? Oh, kiss off. What was your reaction?
Well, first, thank God some common sense finally won the day, but it just goes to show when President Trump is talking about the deep state, when we are talking about these unelected bureaucrats that impose their agenda on these critical agencies, it just kind of blows your mind on what they're thinking. And oh, by the way, I was doing some reading on it. The 2 people that have stepped up to say that was us, neither one of them have ever complained. The woman did not say it was non-consensual or she was being harassed. So how did this unelected assistant secretary kind of impose her ideology on this photo that was a celebration of one of the greatest victories over Nazism in world history? I mean, how did this happen, and would it continue to happen, and how much of this is happening around our bureaucracy that we don't even know about?
Although the ladies of The View did pretty much agree that the memo to take down the picture was ridiculous, this was still the discussion about it. Listen.
It shows a non-consensual act that made some people. Did I tell him to take it down?
You work for the VA. These are people that literally have trauma in their lives. And you look at what trauma used to mean.
Think about the stuff that you could fix that is real, that will have an impact on the very women you say you're trying to protect.
This is what I'm thinking as I listen to that. Did anybody think
dính được cả nước.